Hi, I'm Dawn from the blog ParkinsonsandUs.com, where I provide nourishing recipes and joyful living tips for care partners everywhere. Today we are going to make blueberry scones. I actually went blueberry picking and I have a lot of blueberries to get through. So I thought the first recipe I would make is a blueberry scone. So let's get started. So before we do anything, you're going to preheat your oven to 375 and you're going to line your baking sheet with either a silicone baking mat or unbleached parchment paper. And then after that, the first thing I like to do is I like to make my flax egg. We are going to use 2 tablespoons of flaxseed and we are going to add 6 tablespoons of filtered water to that flaxseed. And we're just going to mix it up till it's well combined. And then we're just going to set it aside to let it gel and thicken, which will take approximately 10 or 15 minutes. Next, we're going to measure out our flour. And in this recipe, you're going to use 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Here I am using an organic all-purpose flour. When you are baking, it's different than cooking. You really want to measure out your ingredients well. So here when I'm measuring out the flour, after I scoop up the flour, I will use a knife to scrape off the excess and make sure it's an even measurement before I add it to the bowl. After we've measured out our flour, we're going to add the sugar. This recipe calls for 1/3 cup of sugar, and I have decided to use half white sugar and half monk fruit. Monk fruit is a plant-based, non-nutritive sweetener. It has 0 calories and it does not spike your blood sugar. So oftentimes I'll use monk fruit when I'm baking, and in this recipe I'm doing a 50-50 ratio. So the recipe calls for 1/3 cup and I'm doing half of that 1/3 with white sugar and half with monk fruit. Then we're going to add our baking powder, and this recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And then we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt. Next, we're going to take our whisk and just whisk the flour mixture just to make sure to get all the clumps out and to make sure everything is combined. Next, we're going to cut in our butter. This recipe calls for 3/4 cup of non-dairy butter. To cut in the butter, I'll just slice the butter into small square-like pieces, and then I just add it to the flour mixture. Next, we're going to take our pastry cutter and cut in the butter. And all that means is taking your cutter and pushing the butter down into the flour mixture. And you just want to keep doing this until the flour resembles a breadcrumb-like texture. Ultimately, you want the flour mixture to be crumbly-like, almost like the size of little peas. And now we're going to add our fresh blueberries, and this recipe calls for about 1 cup of fresh blueberries. And then you just want to toss the blueberries gently in the flour mixture, just to cover the blueberries gently with flour. So now that we have all the dry mixture measured out, we're going to start adding the wet ingredients. The first thing we'll add is the flax egg. And then we're going to add our milk. This recipe calls for a 1/2 cup of non-dairy plant milk. And here I am using an organic unsweetened soy milk. So once we've poured in the liquid ingredients, you just want to gently mix up the dough, being careful not to mush and smash the blueberries. Just take your time with this and gently mix up the dough until it's just combined. You don't want to overmix your dough. Now we're going to start rolling out the scones. You're going to flour your breadboard or wherever it is you are laying out your dough. And then I like to cut my dough in half, so I'll work with half the dough first and then the other half. So I'm going to cut my dough in half. And then I'm going to lay it down on the floured breadboard, and I'm just going to use my hands to gently press it down into a round circle. I would say the circle is probably about 6 to 8 inches in diameter. You just want to press it out evenly, and it should be about 1/2 inch thick. Next, we're going to cut the dough into about 6 to 8 triangles to create our scones. And next, you just want to gently pick up your scones and you want to lay them down gently on your baking pan. And then you're going to do this all over again with the second half of dough. And then finally, I like to add a little bit of milk and sugar on top of my scones, but this is optional. You definitely don't have to do it. But I'll take a little pastry brush and just dab a little bit of milk on top of each individual scone. And then I'll just sprinkle them a little bit with white sugar. And finally, you're going to place your scones in the oven, and they should bake for anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes or until they're a nice golden color on top. And once they're done, you'll take them out of the oven, and you want to let them cool either on a cooling rack or on the baking sheet itself for about 10 minutes just to set. And once they're cooled, you can just place them on a plate to serve. Oh, these turned out lovely. They smell delicious. I'm gonna make myself a nice hot cup of coffee and have myself a blueberry scone for breakfast. So I hope you like this video, and I hope you give making blueberry scones a try. This is a very easy recipe, and it's a little bit lower in sugar than a regular blueberry scone recipe because I used that monk fruit, or I split it in half. I used half sugar, half monk fruit. So you probably could do all monk fruit as well, but I thought I'd just try half and see how that is. If you want to be part of the Parkinson's and Us community, I would love that. I will put a link in the description below. It's a wonderful community filled with lots of love and support, where I provide nourishing recipes and joyful living tips for care partners everywhere. So until next time, bye for now.